Welcome to Crossroads. Donald Trump may be facing his first impeachment attempt for his second term in office. And also, folks, on this, look, right now, Representative Al Green, a Democrat from Texas, announced he's going to bring articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump for what he's calling the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, which happened under the Biden administration. But look, in other news, the DOGE investigations into Usaid have now revealed that several news outlets were receiving millions upon millions upon millions of dollars in your tax dollars and government funds. This includes government funding to many, Politico, New York Times, others, and a whole long list of quote-unquote independent media all around the world. And we'll discuss these topics and others today in this episode of Crossroads. So folks, let's jump into it. Trump may soon be facing his very first round of impeachment hearings for his second term in office. Remember, they tried doing this before. Representative Al Green, a Democrat from Texas, announced he's going to bring the articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump for what he's calling the ethnic cleansing in Gaza. Now, look, first off, this could be an uphill battle for him, even among Democrats. Trump has only been in office just over 2 weeks. The majority of the war between Hamas and Israel and Gaza, as well as the backing of Israel in the war, that was under the Biden administration. The peace deal came under Trump, but at least the beginning of it. But Trump is facing some additional pressure now over his announced plans to have the United States take over Gaza. He wants to have the U.S. basically run it now and to move the people in the region to other countries such as Lebanon and Egypt.
I rise to announce that the movement to impeach the president has begun. I rise to announce that I will bring articles of impeachment against the president for dastardly deeds proposed and dastardly deeds done. I also rise to say that the impeachment movement is going to be a grass-up movement, not a top-down.
Now, look, doing this is a pretty tall order for Democrats. They impeached Donald Trump twice during his first term in office. This time, they do not have the majority they had before. They probably do not have the votes. And also, the issue of Gaza and Israel, it's not really black and white in terms of political parties. Aside from the point that much of the war happened under the Biden administration, and a lot of the money given to Israel for that war was under the Biden administration, well, look, Democrats are also really divided on this. Not all of them are on Israel's side. Not all of them are on Gaza's side. This is divisive even with them. And so getting the votes they need for an impeachment over this, it's a pretty tall order. But with that said, look, Trump's plans to turn Gaza into what he's calling the Riviera of the Middle East, it is turning some heads, as you would imagine. The plans are being condemned by a lot of leaders in Europe, Saudi Arabia. They've also come out to condemn the plans. But basically, here's what Trump wants to do. He wants to have the United States take over Gaza. The people who used to live there, the quote-unquote Palestinians, they'll be going to Egypt, to Lebanon, and getting houses and so on while there's rebuilding taking place, because basically there's nothing left of Gaza. They destroyed the overwhelming majority of it. And even the buildings are not totally destroyed. They're condemned because they're damaged. Now look, given this fact, most of the Gaza Strip has been destroyed, and it will likely need to be basically entirely rebuilt. Trump's plan is to have the United States take over Gaza, and he's referring to the area of having the potential of luxurious beachfront property and to be one of the nicest places in the entire region. And his plan to realize that is also going about this right now. He wants to have the U.S. have a foothold in that area to help stabilize the Middle East. It'd be a big move for the U.S., so we'll see if it happens, because it's going to face a lot of pushback. But we'll see again, right? Others in his administration, they've been walking back his statements a bit. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that Trump, what he really meant was that the United States will be helping to rebuild Gaza, not conquering Gaza, with its basic state right now being uninhabitable. And so someone needs to build it back. Who's that someone going to be? Well, we're offering our support, according to him, to help build it back. Now, look, in other news, folks, we are getting more details about all the things our tax dollars were being spent on. And it turns out we've been bankrolling a lot of the corporate media. A lot of the media doing hit pieces on their political rivals, a lot of the media pushing every, alphabet label in the book, every media that was doing these things, it turns out that many of them were getting our tax dollars. They were being bankrolled by our money. And look, they've been doing all these things while getting paid by us to do it. The DOGE investigations into Usaid, they have now revealed that many news outlets were receiving millions of dollars in government funds. The amount to some of them even constitutes the majority of their budgets, like 80% of their budget was coming from our tax dollars. Now, this includes government funding that was going to the New York Times. It was going to Politico. It was going to a ridiculously long list of foreign media. And the findings, well, look, they're raising a lot of concerns right now. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt raised this also during Wednesday's briefing. Watch this.
So upon coming out here to the briefing room, I was made aware of the funding from USAID to media outlets, including Politico, who I know has a seat in this room. And I can confirm that the more than 8 million taxpayer dollars that have gone to essentially subsidizing subscriptions to Politico on the American taxpayers' dime will no longer be happening. The DOGE team is working on canceling those payments now. Again, this is a whole of government effort to ensure that we are going line by line when it comes to the federal government's books. And this president and his team are making decisions across the board on, do these receipts serve the interests of the American people? Is this a good use of the American taxpayers' money? If it is not, that funding will no longer be sent abroad, and American taxpayers will see significant savings because of that effort.
So, did you get that? They found out Politico was getting millions of dollars in our tax funds through USAID to allegedly subsidize their subscriptions. And it turned out that they're not the only outlet getting money like this. And look, if it was just run-of-the-mill subscriptions to these outlets, there wouldn't be too much of an uproar. But it wasn't just subscriptions. Basically, this whole revelation started when Politico suddenly announced that it could not make payroll for its staff. What happened? Well, this started some speculation that, while people were joking at first, maybe they suddenly lost some of the money given the recent slew of reports about the DOGE department and its investigations into USAID and that money being cut off. Some began questioning, well, did Politico get money through that as well? And did that affect their budget because that got cut off? Well, look, luckily we have the ability to check, and users searched for it, and here's what they found. It turns out that yes, Politico was getting a lot of money, about $8.1 million, in fact, through USAID. And a deeper look into this showed that even that was just a partial picture. Zero Hedge, they claim Politico received upwards of $27 million under the Biden administration. And this likewise started raising some questions about the nature of the payments themselves. Look, now, it seems a lot of the money was going to subscriptions and various government agencies buying subscriptions, but the cost of those subscriptions became a point. Like, why does it cost about $517,000 for just 37 subscriptions? Seems a bit odd, right? Now, people point to, of course, they have this premier level of subscriber status. But the other question is, did they only do that because they know they get money? That's the other question, right? But after that, people started searching for other news outlets. I wonder who else was getting money. It turns out Reuters was getting about $9.1 million for, quote, active social engineering defense through a Department of Defense contract. Interesting. Now, I looked into that personally. Here's a page on DARPA, which is kind of the R&D branch of the Pentagon, for what that may be. And it says this: the Active Social Engineering Defense ASED program aims to develop the core technology to develop the capability to automatically identify, disrupt, and investigate social engineering attacks, meaning they're trying to fool people. If successful, the USED technology will do this by actively detecting attacks, intervening in communications between users and potential attackers, and coordinating investigations into the source of the attack. In other words, if you have people trying to influence you, maybe disinformation or something like that, This is something to detect that. And it turned out also the Associated Press was getting a lot of government money. Millions and millions of dollars, in fact. And also the New York Times was getting U.S. government money. Now, I had to look through the data. It looks like it's a couple million. I know some people put it a lot higher. It seems that a lot of it is for news subscriptions. I think some people were confusing the money between New York Times and New York University. But again, there is a lot of money there regardless. And of course, there were other outlets as well, including foreign outlets like the BBC, even in the United Kingdom, getting American taxpayer dollars. And some of the efforts to go after so-called disinformation, it turns out some of those organizations countering disinformation or whatever else, even in the UK, were likewise being bankrolled by your tax dollars. And Zero Hedge also noted that the money to these various outlets also was not just to subscriptions, as some have framed it. It was for things like ad contracts, it was media conferences, it was sponsorships, it was other methods to funnel money into these news organizations. And there was other programs that seemed to have funneled government money through other ways, right? But even just the subscriptions say a lot. It even alleged that the amount of paid government subscriptions to some of these outlets is concerning because, look, it amounts in some cases to a large percentage of some of their subscriber bases. Meaning, look, some of these news outlets are effectively getting propped up by this money. And there's another point to this as well. How do they decide which news outlets they give money to and which ones they do not? Because going through this, it seems that the only ones they're giving money to are on one side of the political aisle. Does this represent a type of state-subsidized partisanship within our government? That they're only paying for subscriptions for one type of news outlet, at least on a broad scale? And then, again, effectively running propaganda through those outlets, showing one side of the political arguments, while the rest goes unheard and struggles to survive while this system works to censor them. How is this happening? And look, folks, I did some more digging. It actually goes a lot deeper than this. And let me show you something. This is Reporters Without Borders. They said this: USAID programs support independent media. Some independent media, we're independent, we didn't get this, right? But support independent media in more than 30 countries, but it is difficult to assess the full extent of the harm done to the global media. They're, of course, defending these outlets from losing their money. They say many organizations are hesitant to draw attention for fear of risking long-term funding or coming under political attacks. According to a USAID fact sheet, which has since been taken offline, they deleted it. In 2023, the agency funded training and support for 6,200 journalists, assisted 707 non-state news outlets, and supported 279 media sector civil society organizations dedicated, it says, to strengthening independent media. And notice the 2025 foreign aid budget included $268,376,000 already allocated by Congress to support, quote, independent media and the free flow of information. And now look, it notes one picture of this. In Ukraine, it says, where 9 out of 10 media outlets rely on USAID funding. 9 out of 10 rely on our funding. It says several local media have already announced the suspension of their activities and are searching for alternate solutions. It says at Slivso.info, 80% of our budget is affected, says Anna Babinets, CEO and co-founder of this independent investigative media outlet based in Kiev. We were bankrolling the media all around the world, folks. And look, now at least, according to the White House, and thanks to the DOGE department, it seems the money may no longer be flowing like it used to, and a lot of people are big mad about that. Now, as things stand right now, all direct hire personnel of USAID have been placed on administrative leave. And with all this going on, the DOGE department and Elon Musk, well, they're facing a lot of attacks right now. Democrat members of Congress have made DOGE, and in particular its investigations of USAID, one of their biggest issues. They are making this a bigger issue than the mass deportations. They're making this a bigger issue than anything. This is the one they're trying to defend as much as they can. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has even said that DOGE amounts to an unelected shadow government that is now conducting a hostile takeover of the federal government. And he's now working with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries on legislation to stop this under the narrative of stopping unlawful meddling. They aim to put an end to the meddling kids that Elon Musk is recruiting, and that DOGE of theirs too. And folks, look, to their point, one of the main arguments is that whether Republicans like what the money is being spent on or not, Democrats say that Congress should have a role in determining the budget and where the money goes. And they argue that Elon Musk should not have the ability to just shut down programs and spending. The technicality of this, though, and getting into the weeds of it, is that yes, Congress decides budgets for agencies, but how that money is spent, that tends to be a whole other story. And what Elon Musk is doing right now is looking into how that money is being spent and raising flags over what he regards as, possible misuse of it, which could spur investigations and maybe even criminal investigations. Now, he is also freezing some agencies. He did do this to USAID briefly, or making people work from home while he does this work, and he's getting access to a lot of information that was not normally available to anybody. In fact, USAID used to stonewall even a lot of congressional investigations. Now, Senator Andy Kim, Democrat, of course, he raised some of the concerns coming from the Democrat side over USAID during an interview with CNN. Here's what he said.
This is about us in this very dangerous very dangerous global environment right now, the most dangerous environment I've ever seen during my lifetime. We deserve to have every tool at our disposal. And we've always had a foreign policy based upon defense, diplomacy, and development. That is something that Ronald Reagan himself was a big supporter of, which is why USAID is in the Reagan building here in D.C., is because it was a bipartisan understanding about having those tools. And we're now seeing that come to an end.
And look, Democrats, they're also coming out to protest against the actions we're seeing from the DOGE department to investigate, of course, USAID. This was Senator Ed Markey during protests in Washington, D.C.
This is the time when we have to stand up and to fight, to not stand on the sidelines, to have people by the millions are going to have to stand up and protest. When we come back here the next time, there should be hundreds of thousands and millions of people descending on Washington, D.C.
As things currently stand, they do not have hundreds of thousands or millions of people protesting. Actually, in terms of the regular protests, it looks like more normal people, they're interested in pushing back against the mass deportations right now. For example, what we're seeing in Los Angeles with the anti-deportation protests, a lot of the grassroots seems to be focused on that. It seems like the interested parties in protesting the investigations of USAID, it's more on the political side. This is more like an inside baseball type thing, at least in my take. But in terms of the legalities of the DOGE department and the role that Elon Musk is playing, Musk is being defined legally as a government employee, although he's not taking any pay. And the DOGE department is legally not new. Here's how Trump ended up doing it. It wasn't just created through executive order, which is what a lot of people thought he did. It turns out what Trump actually did was he renamed the United States Digital Service as the United States DOGE Service. And then he established it in the executive office of the president. He basically just reorganized an existing office, renamed it, and is using that as his tool for this, meaning it's actually probably legally sound. But back to the point of DOGE and the investigations into USAID, the Trump administration has also responded to the criticisms by exposing what federal funding has actually been spent on. And this counter-argument was raised by the White House press secretary during Wednesday's briefing. Watch this.
And I would just say a strong message to Democrats who are out there pretending to be outraged about the long list of crap that this administration is cutting federal waste and funding, like $2 million for sex changes in Guatemala, $6 million to fund tourism in Egypt, $20 million on a new Sesame Street show in Iraq, $4.5 million to combat disinformation in Kazakhstan. I could go on, and I'm happy to provide this list to every single one of you. Democrats are outraged that the American people want to be, they want their taxpayers going to good uses, not stuff like this. But then they're very quiet about the fact that there are still North Carolinians and people in California who have lost everything. And in the last 4 years, this federal government did nothing to help them. This president will continue to put Americans first. And I think the successes of this week so far speak to that. And it's only Wednesday. So I'll see you guys later this week, and we'll see you this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Well, that's a crazy amount of things that I personally know I don't want my tax dollars going to. And it doesn't end there. The list just goes on. The White House released a list of examples of wasteful items that USAID money has been going to. Let me just read y'all what it says. This is the White House. It says, quote, "Here are only a few examples of the waste and abuse. $1.5 million to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia's workplaces and business communities. $70,000 for production of a DEI musical in Ireland. $2.5 million for electric vehicles in Vietnam. $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia. $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. $2 million for sex changes and LGBT activism in Guatemala. $6 million to fund tourism in Egypt. Hundreds of thousands of dollars for a nonprofit linked to designated terrorist organizations, even after an inspector general launched an investigation. Millions of dollars to EcoHealth Alliance, which was involved in research at the Wuhan lab, right? Good old COVID. Hundreds of thousands of meals that went to Al-Qaeda affiliated fighters in Syria, funding to print personalized contraceptive birth control devices in developing countries, hundreds of millions of dollars to fund irrigation, canal farming equipment, and even fertilizer used to support the unprecedented poppy cultivation and heroin production in Afghanistan. Got to help those Afghan farmers grow their heroin, right? Benefiting the Taliban, it says. Now, look, I think some of these are a bit ridiculous, personally. A DEI musical in Ireland, a transgender opera in Colombia. You know, the argument coming out is USAID was helping all the starving kids in Africa. It turns out maybe the real argument should be like, well, how can a child in Guatemala know what gender they are without the help of USAID? Aside from that, folks, look, Republicans in Congress, they're also making their positions heard as well. This is Senator John Kennedy speaking on the efforts of Elon Musk.
Now, President Trump ran for office saying, I'm going to review every single penny in the federal budget. Now, how are you going to review the spending in the federal budget without reviewing the spending?
We'll likely see a lot more on this. Right now, it looks like Musk is just flagging issues for further investigations. All we're seeing right now is the flagging of issues. We're not seeing the actions taking against them. And look, it's already having a big effect. USAID has already, as we speak, been moved under the State Department. And Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, he is also now the acting director of USAID. And he has said the projects of it going forward, they're going to have to be more in line with the objectives of the State Department and U.S. interests. And look, the investigations, they're not going to stop at USAID. Elon Musk has already moved to investigate the Treasury Department, and he is now investigating the Medicare agency payment system for fraud. He said this, quote, yeah, this is where the big money fraud is happening. That's his allegation, at least. And he has now also unveiled his next objective, next in line. Elon Musk is going to audit the IRS, he claims. Now, he made this decision through an online poll, similar to how he made other public decisions. And he asked this. He said, quote, "Would you like DOGE to audit the IRS?" And the response to that came back overwhelmingly as yes or big yes, with only 8.2% saying they do not want an audit of the IRS. Maybe that was the IRS employees, right? And look, in response to the poll, Musk wrote this: Vox populi, vox Dei. That's a Latin phrase meaning the voice of the people is the voice of God, suggesting he's going to do it. He's going to move forward with this. Look, a lot more to come, folks. Get ready for it. It seems in other news, though, Donald Trump was not joking when he announced plans to begin sending illegal immigrants to Guantanamo Bay. He's now doing it. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break. We'll be back in less than 1 minute, so stay tuned. Welcome back. It turns out that Donald Trump was not joking when he said he wanted to send illegal immigrants to Guantanamo Bay because, well, he started doing it. Newsmax said this: the first U.S. military flight to deport illegal immigrants from the United States to Guantanamo Bay was set to depart Tuesday, a U.S. official said. It is the first step in what is expected to be a surge in the number of migrants held at the Navy base in Cuba, which for decades was primarily used to detain foreigners associated with the September 11, 2001 attacks. Terrorist attacks, they mean, right? Now, they note that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who was assigned to Guantanamo Bay when he was on active duty, has called it a perfect place to house the immigrants. Additional U.S. troops have arrived at the facility in the past few days to help prepare it. And it notes that in addition, the U.S. flew immigrants, and what they mean is illegal immigrants, but they're not saying that because it's CBS, flew illegal immigrants back to India on Monday, and that flight was still in progress as of midday Tuesday, the officials said. And notes as well, the officials spoke on the condition of anonymity to provide details not yet made public. And there had previously been 7 deportation flights to Ecuador, Guam, Honduras, and Peru, in addition to Colombia. It says, in addition, Colombia officials flew to the U.S. and took 2 flights of migrants, i.e. illegal immigrants, back to their countries because after Trump pressured Colombia, Colombia dedicated presidential jets to help fly them back home. It says there are about 300 service members supporting the holding operations at Guantanamo Bay, and the number will likely fluctuate, it says, based on the requirements of the Department of Homeland Security, which is the lead federal agency on this. Now look, sorry, it's Newsmax, right? Now, folks, that said, right now, it seems that Guantanamo Bay is more being used as a temporary holding facility. It's not like it's a full prison for like criminal aliens, at least not right now. One of the big challenges that has already come up with Trump's plans for mass deportations is basically this: they don't have enough holding space when they go out and arrest people and try to decide where to send them. They don't have enough space. And this has led to some reports that people, around ICE and roundups and so on, they're just being set free anyways. If they arrest more people than they can hold, they got to let them go. So the 30,000 beds at Guantanamo Bay are kind of being set aside to expand the scope of these operations. They take them there, then they decide where to send them. And also on that point, while deportations are now happening, the scale is not that large comparatively. Some critics of Trump have actually pointed out, and it's true, the current rate of deportations is about the same as we saw under the Obama administration. Remember, immigration groups referred to Barack Obama as the deporter-in-chief. He deported a lot of people, and Trump is not necessarily deporting any more people than Obama right now. But that may change. Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, he has said the rate of deportations will be gradually increased. And to do that, they need to find new ways to hold people after they round them up and to get ready to send them back home. Now, on that point as well, look, one of the big hurdles that the efforts are also facing is we have sanctuary cities all across the country. And look, if you don't want to get deported, you probably want to go to a sanctuary city, obviously, right? Because that means if you get arrested, the police do not hand you over to ICE. They conceal you. And the policies also make it a whole lot more difficult to carry out deportations since, look, even if local officials do not block the efforts, at the very least, they're refusing to assist as they would normally have to. But the whole sanctuary city effort, well, that's facing some additional pressure now, because guess what? Their funding is now at risk. This relates to a day one policy of the new Attorney General, Pam Bondi. She was just sworn in, and guess what she did right after being sworn in, along with some other key policies? Well, Fox News had the exclusive on this, and it said this: Bondi has directed the DOJ to pause all federal funding for sanctuary cities. They just lost all their federal funding. But her new directives, they don't end there either. Let me show you what she has also now announced. Fox News had the exclusive again on this. It says Attorney General Pam Bondi will issue several major directives on her first day leading the Justice Department, including orders to combat the weaponization of the legal system, make prosecutors seek the death penalty when appropriate, and work with the Department of Homeland Security to completely eliminate cartels and transnational criminal organizations, Fox News Digital has learned. It says Bondi was confirmed by the Senate on Tuesday night as Attorney General and sworn in on Wednesday. And Fox News Digital exclusively obtained memos outlining Bondi's first day directives, which will lay the groundwork for the Justice Department under her leadership. It says Bondi is set to establish the Weaponization Working Group, which will review the activities of all law enforcement agencies over the past 4 years, no matter what it is, right? Whether it was, police, whether it was the sheriffs, whether it was the FBI, everything they did over the last 4 years to identify instances of politicized justice. It says as well, the working group's first review will include prosecutions against Trump led by former special counsel Jack Smith, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, and New York Attorney General Letitia James, who brought the civil fraud case against Trump and his family. They are going to now investigate the prosecutors. The people who brought charges against Donald Trump are now going to be investigated, allegedly, according to this. It says as well, the working group will also review any potential prosecutorial abuse regarding January 6, 2021, the FBI's targeting of Catholic Americans, the Justice Department's targeting of parents at school board meetings, and abuses of the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, or FACE Act. Those were, again, people protesting abortions at abortion clinics and then getting arrested for it. That will now be investigated as well. It says further in, as for cartels, Bondi is directing the Department of Justice to work closely with the Department of Homeland Security and other federal partners to, quote, completely eliminate the threats of cartels and transnational criminal organizations, meaning a lot of the gangs and organized crime groups. Folks, I said it before, I'll say it again. What you're watching right now is just the pieces getting set up on the chessboard. You are not watching the game yet. You're watching the preparations for the game. And the shock and awe, really, which is what it is, the shock and awe now happening is merely you watching the positioning of what is soon to come. It seems that we're just watching now the pre-game, get ready for the game to be played, because it's going to get interesting. That said, thank you so much. Join me tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Please share this episode. Help us get the word out. Give us a like as well. It helps us. And as always, folks, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.